The world did not expect it to happen. Not in the 19th century when it was built, not in the 20th century when empires fought over it, and certainly not in the 21st century when global trade was supposed to be unstoppable. Yet there was a moment, one strange, impossible moment, when a single human decision, a single ship, and a single slice of desert brought the world economy to its knees. It wasn't a war, it wasn't a weapon, it wasn't a bomb. It was simply a canal. A canal that, for a brief window in history, reminded the entire world that the foundations of global power are far more fragile than we like to believe. This is the Suez Canal. Suez Canal is a waterway so important that when it stops, the world stops. Most people remember the modern incident, the 6 days in 2021 when a container ship blocked the canal and froze almost 10% of the world's trade. But long before that moment turned into memes and satellite photos, the Suez Canal was already one of the most dangerous and contested pieces of land on Earth. It's a narrow line carved through the desert, too thin to defend, too essential to lose, and too valuable for any empire to ignore. It is the gateway between Europe and Asia, the shortcut that turned the British Empire into a world-spanning network, the pressure point that triggered wars, coups, invasions, and diplomatic crises that shaped the 20th century. But the real story of the Suez Canal, the one rarely told in full, is not just about trade. It's about power, silent power, hidden power. The kind of power that does not need armies or missiles, only the ability to decide who may pass and who must wait. The canal is a narrow throat through which the lifeblood of nations flows. Oil, goods, money, influence. Choke the throat, and the world suffocates. And that is why the Suez Canal became the stage for one of the greatest geopolitical confrontations in modern history. A confrontation so intense that the President of the United States threatened to destroy the British pound if London did not back down. A confrontation where the old world met the new, where fading empires collided with rising superpowers, and where one nation dared to seize the canal and rewrite the map of global influence overnight. But before we get to that moment, before the crisis, the ship blockages, the wars, and the political earthquakes, you must understand the hook. The thing that grabs your attention, whether you live in New York, or Los Angeles, or anywhere in between. It is the simple fact that the entire global economy, the safety of American oil supply, the price of gasoline, the cost of food, the stability of Europe and Asia, all of it can be disrupted by a canal that is, at its narrowest point, only 2.5 feet wide. That's the width of a highway that decides whether the world flows or crashes. Imagine for a moment that you're watching the news. You hear that a single ship is stuck sideways in a desert canal thousands of miles away. It sounds trivial, but within hours, gas prices rise, shipping stocks crash, billions evaporate from global markets. Factories in Europe and Asia shut down because parts cannot reach them. Trade lines back up like a clogged artery. The world, suddenly, is reminded that it still depends on a 19th century waterway built with pickaxes and human sweat. The Suez Canal is a single point of failure in the global system, and if it goes dark, our world becomes unpredictable, unstable, and vulnerable. This vulnerability is not an accident. It is a design, a consequence of geography and ambition. The Suez Canal exists because the world needed a shortcut, and shortcuts always come with danger. Now let's go back to the beginning. The canal was a dream of ancient rulers, a whispered idea across centuries. What if the Mediterranean could be connected to the Red Sea? What if Europe could reach India without circling Africa? What if armies, fleets, merchants, and empires could slice through the desert instead of crossing oceans? It was impossible. Or at least, it seemed impossible. The French were the first to turn the dream into reality. Led by Ferdinand de Lesseps, they carved a straight line through sand and rock, through blistering heat and disease. When it opened in 1869, the world gasped. Suddenly, continents moved closer. The British Empire tightened its grip on India and the East. Global trade doubled. The balance of power shifted overnight. But the canal had a flaw that would haunt the world for more than a century. It was in Egypt. And Egypt, unlike Britain or France, did not control the world. It was a nation whose geography made it essential, but whose governments were too weak to resist foreign pressure. So the British occupied Egypt. They did not call it conquest. They called it protecting interests. But the meaning was clear. The canal belonged to the empire now. For nearly a century, the British Empire used the Suez Canal as its lifeline. Their soldiers guarded it. Their ships passed through it. Their wealth depended on it. Without the Suez Canal, Britain was not an empire. It was just an island. But history moves forward, and by the mid-20th century, Britain was fading. Meanwhile, Egypt was rising, not militarily, but politically. A young officer named Gamal Abdel Nasser seized power in a revolution. He wanted Egypt to be independent, modern, respected, and above all, free from foreign control. And he knew that the canal, the thread that tied Egypt to British influence, needed to be cut. In 1956, he made a decision that shocked the world. He nationalized the Suez Canal. To Americans today, nationalization might sound like a technical term, but in 1956, it was an earthquake. Imagine waking up to see that one of the world's most important trade routes had just been seized by a country most Western leaders did not trust. Britain, France, and Israel panicked. They saw Nasser not as a leader, but as a threat. Someone who could choke Europe's oil supply with a single command. So the old powers did what old powers do. They planned an attack. Their plan was simple. Israel would invade Sinai. Britain and France would pretend to intervene as peacekeepers. They would bomb Egyptian airfields, defeat Nasser's army, and retake the canal. They assumed America would support them. They were wrong. President Dwight Eisenhower understood something the old empires did not. The world had changed. The United States was now the dominant Western power, and Washington had no interest in supporting colonial-style invasions. Worse, Eisenhower believed that if the West attacked Egypt, the Arab world would turn to the Soviet Union for protection, giving Moscow influence over the Middle East, the world's oil supply, and the emerging Cold War battleground. So Eisenhower did the unthinkable. He ordered Britain, France, and Israel to stop. He demanded they withdraw. And when Britain refused, Eisenhower delivered the most devastating geopolitical threat a superpower can give. He would destroy the British pound. Within hours, the empire that once ruled the seas collapsed under financial pressure. Britain obeyed. France obeyed. Israel withdrew. Nasser became a hero across the Arab world. And the United States proved for the first time that it, not Britain, not France, was now the leader of the Western world. This was the moment the Suez Canal reshaped global power. But the canal story did not end there. Over the next decades, it would be closed, mined, fought over, and reopened. During the Arab-Israeli wars, the canal became a front line, a moat of fire between armies. Once in 1967, it closed for 8 years, creating what historians call the longest traffic jam in history, where ships were trapped inside the canal until rust grew on their hulls. Yet each time it reopened, the world returned to it. Because the Suez Canal is not optional, it is essential. Today, 12% of global trade passes through it. 1 million barrels of oil move through it daily. Every major power, America, Europe, China, India, depends on it. And every time tensions rise in the Middle East, every time oil prices spike, every time a ship runs aground, the world is reminded that the canal is not just infrastructure, it is leverage. It is vulnerability. It is a pressure point that any crisis can twist. In 2021, when a single ship got stuck, the world laughed, memes spread, jokes went viral. But behind the humor was a truth far darker than people realized. 6 days of blockage caused billions in economic loss. Supply chains collapsed. Factories in Europe shut down. Energy prices soared. And international shipping companies began quietly asking a terrifying question. What if next time it's not an accident? What if next time it's war? Because here is the thing the memes never told you. In the age of cyber attacks, drones, covert sabotage, and proxy conflicts, blocking the Suez Canal is not difficult. And every intelligence agency in the world knows this. Every military strategist knows this. Every nation that relies on global trade knows this. The canal is a choke point, and choke points can be strangled. This is why the United States still invests heavily in Egyptian stability, why the Navy monitors the Red Sea, why NATO tracks cargo movement, why China quietly invests in alternative routes, why Europe panics whenever tensions rise near the Sinai. The Suez Canal is the artery connecting east and west. And as long as the world runs on oil, shipping, and trade, as long as globalization continues, as long as great powers exist, the canal will remain one of the most valuable and vulnerable locations on Earth. The story of the Suez Canal is not about the past. It is about the present and the future. It is about how a narrow strip of water shapes the fate of nations, how geography becomes destiny, how a simple line in the desert can reveal which empires rise and which empires fall. And as the world enters a new era of competition between America and China, between Russia and the West, between old alliances and new ambitions, the canal remains a silent witness, watching, waiting, knowing that sooner or later the world will test it again. When that day comes, we will be reminded once more that global stability rests on fragile foundations, that even the strongest economies depend on narrow waterways, that the most powerful nations are vulnerable to geography, and that sometimes all it takes to shake the world is one canal. If you enjoy documentaries like this about geopolitics, history, and global strategy, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The next episode will reveal a choke point far more dangerous than Suez or Panama. See you in the next episode.